Hello, everybody. This is Season 1, Episode 3 of Musicians Forum. And I have today David Threlkeld from University of Cumberlands. Actually, he lives here in London.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he doesn't know it, but I'm about to tell him that he's actually I would say, maybe the second oldest person to know me in Kentucky. When I moved here in 93, that's when I met you. So
there we go.
So he has a little bit here. But I wanted to bring him onto the show. I'm really excited for this interview today. He is definitely in the music education world, but also as a performer and I think a purveyor of jazz and big band and a lot of the musical culture that's very hard to find in our area. And I'm very thankful for folks like him who've taken it to educate and share it with us. So we'll talk to him today.
All right.
So welcome, David.
Thank you.
So we are literally, 4 days from the start of the semester?
Let's see what it's today. Thursday. We start officially on Monday, so that sounds about right.
Oh, well. All right. So not to put you on the spot, but what year is this?
This is year number 33. So
wow.
I was doing the math the other day. After I finished this year, this will have been my 66th semester. So yeah, it goes by fast. It's funny. People tell you that, but you never realize it until you turn around one day and it's like, whoa.
Yeah. So where did you start? Was it Moorhead? Or
my undergraduate degree was at Moorhead
here
in Kentucky. And then after that, I got a music education degree. And then after that, I went to Northwestern University, just north of Chicago, and got a music performance degree. And then I applied for the job at Cumberland. My predecessor left and took a job at Marshall University, and a friend of mine that was teaching at Cumberland called up and said, "Hey, you should apply for this job." And it was in the middle of the summer. And, they were looking for somebody in a hurry. And I was convinced I wasn't going to get the job because I was fresh out of grad school.
And where were you living?
I was living back home. I'd gone back and taken a job at a music store there, selling, music instruments and that kind of stuff. And I got that call and I thought, well, I want to teach college eventually, so I'll just do a practice interview. So I wasn't nervous. I was sure I was going to get the gig. I just went down and did the interview.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that they offered the job to somebody else before they did to me, and they found out what it paid. He turned it down. Nobody's ever told me that officially, but that was kind of the sense that I got. So they called me up. It was like, I don't know. It seems like it was like 10 days before the semester started. They said, "We'd like to offer you the position." I was like, "Oh my goodness!" So there I was.
So what year was that?
That was 1990. I came in the fall of 90.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I started in 93.
Okay.
And I remember Erica Harris is probably the only one I can say has known me the longest in Kentucky. So, and then I guess I want to say if it was maybe my fall freshman year or maybe in my spring is when I had my first music course. I can't remember which. But.
So where were you before Kentucky? Was
West
that
Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, I was originally from West Virginia. I actually went to the library and went through. Of course, this was before internet. Yeah. We had to go to the library and actually do research. And I picked colleges that were within a 6-hour day trip radius.
How fun. That
were smaller. I didn't necessarily want to go to the bigger schools. I wanted to try to find something in the arts. Uh-huh. And Cumberland was one of them, but Erica begged me to come down.
No kidding.
So
good for her.
I could not. When I hit campus, drove on campus, Dr. Broom saw me. Oh, yeah. He goes, "You must be a great kid." And he knew me because he saw his picture and he would study those applications and all that. And of course,
he remembered everything.
And my mom was in the car and she goes, How did you meet him? I didn't. He saw my picture. Yeah, and so she said, "No, surely you're going here." And so we did. We stayed there. My daughter's going there now.
Yeah.
I tried to convince her to go in a little bit more music, but she's
doing a little bit.
She's doing a little bit, enough to satisfy. And it's like a Muddy Creek bank, right?
It's all right. I'm glad she's doing what she's doing.
Yeah, she's great. No, so your family is also musical. So your daughter is in theater and music.
Yeah, I always joke around. I said she never met a stage she didn't like. She's been taking dance since she was 3 years old, and she does theater. I don't know, several performances a year. She's involved in Berea in a company up there. It's a local, how would you say, community theater. Oh, yeah. And she was there as a student, and now she teaches there. So she's been doing that. And then she also sings, and she plays saxophone in my jazz band. Mm-hmm. My wife's a vocalist as well, and she plays piano and flute and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of musicians.
She's also an educator as well at Cumberlands.
Yeah. She retired from the public school. She taught at Jackson County, and now she teaches at Cornerstone Christian here in London. She loves it.
Oh, wow. Kids. Okay. Yeah, great school. So, all right, I wrote down some questions, but the biggest thing, I'm going to just come and show here before I
Sure.
take a step back. When did you start? When did it kick off for you, music-wise? When you said, "I really, number one, want to learn music, but teach it."
For me, it was really kind of interesting. There wasn't anything that was, just. My mom started me on piano lessons when I was a kid, but it didn't really take. I was like kind of moderately interested in it, but it's eventually quit that, which is one of my biggest regrets in life is quitting piano. And I don't know how many times I've heard people say that. I wish I'd stuck with piano.
Yeah.
But then when it really kind of started for real was in sixth grade. They signed people up for band, and originally I was going to be a drummer.
Okay.
And signed up for drums, and the band director said, "We got too many people signed up for drums. We need people to play some other instruments." And I was like, "Oh, the sax looks kind of cool. I'll try that."
Yeah.
And that was literally how I chose the saxophone. And then played, through grade school, middle school, and the bug didn't really hit until about my sophomore year of high school. I was taking lessons with Eugene Norton, who ended up being my saxophone teacher at Moorhead during the summer. Mm-hmm. And he just looked at me one day and he says, "So David, what do you think you want to do for a career?" And he knew already. And he was kind of setting me up, and quite frankly, I'd never really thought about it that seriously. And I was kind of like, well, I think I might kind of like to do music. And then we started the conversation about, it's like, okay, well, this is what you need to do if you're going to do that. Be serious about it. So that's really where it got started. Mm-hmm. So I just went through the public school system, like so many people do, did the band thing, and just never quit doing it.
Well, so at that time, because you got the big orchestra pieces in the standards. But what were you listening to? Were you a radio listener? Did you listen to albums, or what was your thing?
Okay, so when I was going through middle school, I was typical rock and roll guys. I have still to this day, I still have all my vinyl Kiss albums.
Back in the day. Don't let those go.
It's like Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, Styx, who I'm going to see tomorrow night, by the way.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
So I was listening to all those rock bands, and then once I started to get serious about music. Our band director sometimes would do like some orchestral transcriptions, and I remember we sight read Movement from Holst, The Planets, and I went out and bought a copy of that, and I was listening to it. My mom told me years later their bedroom was on the other side of mine, so at night I'd listen to my music at night, while everybody's going to bed. And he looked over at her one night and says, "Is it my imagination, or has his taste in music improved dramatically?"
They were thankful not to hear that Destroyer album again.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I started listening to that, and then when I started doing saxophone lessons, which was before I studied with Gene Norton my sophomore year, I studied with another person my freshman year. My mom went out to a record store with me, and we just picked 2 records that had pictures of saxophones on the cover. Yeah. No idea who they were, and one of them was a recording of a really standard saxophone concerto with orchestra, as a Russian guy playing it, the Glazunov concerto, and I wore that out, listened to it over and over and over. And the other was David Sanborn, who's for those of you guys aren't familiar with David Sanborn, he's played on a million different commercial recordings, a super distinctive sound, super copied. And the same thing with that one. I just listened to it over and over and over again. So it was just by happenstance that we had grabbed those 2 albums, but both of them, kind of fed both sides of my music.
I was going to say, it's kind of both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, because I've done both, all through my career. So it's kind of cool that it just kind of worked out that way.
Yeah. So would you say that if you were to, from a saxophonist standpoint, would you say that was where you picked up all your influences, or was it later on as you started to get exposed to different styles that it kind of really turned the corner and say, this is what David sounds like?
It would have been later. I listened to those guys, and I'm still like Dave Sanborn. So, matter of fact, I had tickets to go hear him at the Blue Note in New York the month after COVID shut everything down.
Oh man,
I'd actually heard him once before, so I wasn't super bummed.
Yeah,
I was just
still New York,
but but still, it's like it's so there's that. But as far as my personal preference, listening to lots of different jazz recordings, I find that once I started doing that in college, that was where all my money was going, was toward jazz recordings, and that kind of thing. And a lot of the standard people talk about, they talk about jazz players, but the one that really got my attention was a guy named Michael Brecker. He and his brother Randy were at the forefront of the jazz rock fusion scene in the 70s and the 80s. And Michael's another one of those guys that everybody's heard, but they don't know it. He's been on literally hundreds of recordings, pop recordings and jazz recordings and things like that. And he was actually before Lenny Pickett, the guy that plays saxophone on Saturday Night Live. Michael Brecker was playing on there for a while.
Oh, see, and we would have done.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very distinctive sound, and I just enjoyed so much his. When he played, he always played with an incredible technique. That's the first thing that got the sax player's attention. But the thing that I really appreciated was he was, even within all the technique that he used, it was always very lyrical, very expressive, and very passionate. There was nothing contrived about what he was doing. He was really, a serious musician, serious about his art. And fortunately, I got to hear him several times, which is kind of difficult when you live in Kentucky, but I did. And he did a performance at UK as part of their Spotlight Jazz series years ago. And afterwards, they had a kind of a meet and greet thing. And I got to just talk to him for like 2 minutes. But he was
that's awesome,
such a nice guy, And I read his autobiography or not his autobiography, his biography just last year. And everybody talks about just how genuine and humble he was, And the interesting thing about that book, not to get too far down the Michael Brecker tangent.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. One of the things that I found really interesting is they talked about how he's widely regarded as the foremost influential saxophonist of this generation by people that are in that style of music.
Yeah.
And talked about how he was always, questioning himself. And it's like, he's always trying to prove himself. His brother, big brother Randy, was a trumpet player, and he's always trying to, get the approval of his brother Randy. So it made me think about, all of us have those little, voices in the back of our head. It's like, you need to be better, and it's like you're not as good in such and such, and blah blah blah. And here he is, the pinnacle. It's like Michael Jordan or LeBron James thinking, I'm not sure I'm good enough to hang with these guys.
Well, from a blues aspect, I'm a guitar player and I like the blues, and they always ask Stevie Ray Vaughan, are you the best, and who do you think is the best? My brother is Jimmy. Yeah. But as a guitarist, we all know that Stevie Ray Vaughan is a lot better than his older brother, but that's how it works. Yeah. And that's the challenge, is to, always stay on top of your game.
But to answer your question, he was the one that I really kind of started to really captured my attention and imagination. I thought, man, I'd love to play like this someday. It never will, but that's okay.
but the thing is that inspired you to keep pushing harder and doing more, and playing it. So, excuse me. So for me, being almost a jazz idiot, because I, just like everyone else, I guess, if you just walk down the street and interview people, and ask them, jazz, tell me what you know about it. And you're going to say Miles Davis or Dizzy Gillespie or John Coltrane.
Hey, you know more than most right there.
but those were given to us, like Jerry Maguire. The movie Jerry Maguire, there's a whole segment where the guy's giving him a tape. It's got Coltrane and Miles playing together, and the whole entire time you're like, what is this? But you're getting a little bit of education, So everyone kind of knows when they hear jazz, and you say, well, hey, it sounds like jazz, so I'm going to call it jazz. And then you have the folks that say, well, I love jazz, when it's cool, it's very cool. But when you say, hey, we're going to listen to some jazz, well, no, maybe not today. So it's a very hard, you were talking about earlier about seeing artists in Kentucky and hearing the jazz experience. Thankfully, you have this vehicle at the college, the university, to be able to share that.
Sure.
And so with musicians that you're training and you're educating and you're bringing up, do you find them coming away with a better, I guess, not only education, but appreciation of that?
I think so. It's like, I think this is true with any form of music that you got. At first when people listen to it, it's like, it all sounds the same to me, because they don't know the nuances of it. Like, I'm not really a fan of soccer. I mean, I appreciate that it's a great game and it's, worldwide, people appreciate it, but I don't know the rules that well. And so I don't really appreciate the nuances of it. And I think any music is like that, whether it be jazz or bluegrass or Irish drinking songs, whatever it is. I mean, there's subtleties that once you really start to listen to it and really start to soak up the language of it, you start to appreciate more. I've never tried this in my music appreciation class, but I've often thought I'd like to take like a piece of music that I'm pretty sure they're not going to like. And it's not way out there, but something at the beginning of the semester, and play just a minute for them every single day that they come to class. And at the end of the semester, just see if their attitudes changed about it. And I imagine a lot of them would go, I kind of like this now. I didn't at first, but it's like now I'm starting to kind of understand it. So, and the thing about jazz, my mother was a dancer. When she was 17 years old, she went to New York to study dance at the American School of Ballet.
Oh wow,
In
that's
the
huge.
50s.
That's huge.
Yeah, when jazz was really kind of starting to do its thing, and she talked about it to me years later. She says, to me, jazz is musicians' music. And what she was talking about is like the 1950s, 1960s bebop kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And she's right. It's one of those things where, jazz previous to that in the swing era had been dance music. It was pop music. It was what was on the radio. It's what everybody's listening to. But it became one of these things where these improvisers were, creating this new language, and it was going by fast tempos, and the harmonies were kind of, stretched the ears of the listener. So unless somebody really wanted to invest in it, it's kind of a hard music to grasp onto. Now, I say that, but then there's other styles of music, jazz, that are, what's the word? Less cerebral, not so much about rapid fire improvisations. It's like a more soulful sounding, that kind of thing. That type of jazz a lot of times will kind of draw people in and get their attention. So, and once again, with any style of music, I think there's so many sub genres within it. I think that there's a style of jazz for it everybody could like, but there's probably several styles of jazz that everybody, the same people would say that they don't like. Yeah, and I'm the same way. There's certain styles of jazz I don't like.
Well, I have to admit, this year, I won't say how old I am now, but I'm starting to get to the point where, working to high energetic rock and roll music is driving me nuts, and I really can't just like focus. But over the last 6 months, I've hit some streaming channels just running jazz classics. Mm-hmm. I'm finding I am much more focused, chill. Nothing gets me all wired up. Yeah. And I don't know whether to thank I don't really have a lot of the musical words to throw at it, but I can just sense the fact that it has more organic, heartbeat driven type of tempos, at least in the jazz classic stations I'm listening to, not some of the progressive jazz. Sure. But I have a tendency to think there's more biorhythms in that than most would understand.
Well, one of the things too, it's funny you mentioned that. I'll go into I mentioned my music appreciation class. Mm-hmm. I'll go in, and there's a thing on YouTube, and it's like called coffee jazz, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this very generic sounding. Somebody's playing piano, and maybe sometimes they'll have like a bass and drums behind. It's really soft and it's sedate, and it's mood music is essentially what it is. But if you listen really closely, the guys that are playing good voicings and their chord changes. Mm-hmm. Their melodies are not particularly creative because they're trying to create mood, not be too adventurous. But it's like. And it does kind of, when class starts, get everybody doing that.
So kind of set the mood for it.
Yeah.
So with that being said, with your education and classes that you're teaching, are you, I want to try to, again, use the right kind of terms and all that. Are you doing more theory type things? Or are you really doing more exposure type things whenever you're teaching?
It depends on what class I'm doing. So, for example, I mentioned music appreciation. In that class, we talk a lot about different styles of music in that class and just the elements of music. And when I talk about jazz, I literally will spend like 2 days on it. And that's it. It's like the whole history of jazz.
Yeah.
2 days. So in that case, I'm just trying to say, hey, here's kind of the essence of this music. Here's just little samplings. If you like it, go check out some more stuff. Matter of fact, my entire music appreciation class is just that. It's like, I'm not going to try to change your mind. If you like a particular style of music, great.
Yeah.
And I tell them, this is like a buffet. I'm going to put all this stuff out on the table. And at the end of the semester, you find something else that you like, then great. If not, that's okay too. But at least you've tried it, kind of thing. So, but then, I direct the jazz ensemble at school. And in that particular case, of course, we're rehearsed music. Some of the traditional stuff, that's been around for years. The group that I have is typically a big band, so we'll have 5 saxophone section and 5 saxophones in the section, 4 trombones, 4 trumpets, and a whole rhythm section. So, that's straight out of the swing era instrumentation, but a whole lot more modern and contemporary charts. So we won't be playing like the old Glenn Miller tunes. Sometimes we'll play things that are newly composed that are in funk styles, or it might be
like postmodern jukebox style stuff.
Some of that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then, it's like, sometimes there'll be like arrangements of pop tunes. A couple of years back, and I couldn't believe I was doing this. We did an arrangement with the Sunny Shear. Oh, the beat goes on.
Oh, the
And it's like I would have never thought that would have made a great jazz chart. But I listened to the arrangement.
Yeah.
They send out these sampler recordings, and I was like, that's really cool arrangement. So we did it.
Yeah.
So I try to show the kids a lot of different stuff. At Cumberland, I'm not training people to be professional performing artists. These students that are in our music program typically are in music education, or if they're in the jazz band, a lot of times they're studying something completely outside of music and they're just doing it for fun. So I try to expose them to a lot of different things, have a good time learning, going out and performing, whenever we can, and that kind of thing.
Well, I think it's healthy because I've known several folks. My wife was one. She had been in music, then went to college for music and actually for education. And I have several other family members that kind of did the same thing. And there's a lot of theories on the fact that they had more creativity before they hit said school. Yeah. And then once they got to school, they kind of lost that creativity.
Yeah.
But it sounds like what you're saying is you're just showing, here's the principles of it.
Right.
Keep your creativity, but here's some structure to what you're doing, and maybe you actually open more secret codes to your creativity.
Well, and part of what you're talking about too is if somebody goes into a music degree, one of the very first thing that they do is they study music theory. And it's just the very basics of this is chords and scales and intervals and all that kind of stuff. And suddenly they're studying basically the math and the science and the engineering behind all this music that up until that point has just been expression and art and all that kind of stuff. And for a lot of students that becomes drudgery and can kind of take some of the joy out of it. And you have to do that right off the bat, because once you get into the later part of college, a lot of what you're doing is based off that music theory foundation. So we do see that a lot. A lot of students will go into college thinking, I want to be a music major, and then they'll do that for a couple of semesters, and it's like, no, maybe this is not. And frankly, music education or music, generally speaking, I always tell students, I said, if this is not what you're definitely passionate about doing, then maybe you want to do something else and do music on the side. There's nothing wrong with that. Because I know some great musicians, a lot of great musicians that, it's not their career. One of my good friends lives down in Knoxville, Todd Spangler. He was a music major. They went back to school, got his law degree, and he is a Social Security judge.
Oh, wow.
But he's a phenomenal piano player, both classical and jazz player. Just fantastic. But, it's not his career.
He realized that may not.
It's like it wasn't going to be how he wanted to feed his family.
Sure.
Kind of thing. So when I first started teaching, I used to think I needed to talk people into staying in music. And now I'm just kind of like, okay, if they come to me and say, this is not really what I think I should be doing, I'm like, it's good that you figure it out early.
Yeah.
And for other people, it is. It's there's a teacher that used to teach. Actually, she was still there probably when you were there. I forgot her name. It'll come to me in a minute. But one of the vocal teachers, and she used to tell students, if there's anything else that you can do and be happy, do that. and the whole point she was making was like, there's a lot of hassles that are involved with it. But, for me personally, it's like, I've done it. Like I said, this is your number 33, and I don't regret it. It's like I've enjoyed teaching music, sharing it with other students, whether it be just a survey class or actually making music with an ensemble and taking it out and performing for others. It's always been enjoyable. There's been some days that are better than others, of course.
Right.
But, I don't regret having done it, but I know that that's not the path everybody should take. So I don't try to push it on anybody.
I think particularly my sister and my wife, who both went through the music education side, thoroughly enjoyed their experiences there. In fact, we went back for the homecoming reunion, and we kind of, I don't know if you remember that, they absolutely had, the flashbacks and all that, and they loved singing with the choir and the whole thing. But when it came to the education part of it, when they actually came to say, this is what you're going to do every day, you're going to walk in, you're going to stare these kids in the face and say, all right, here's what we're going to learn today. It really wasn't the way they want to do it. They enjoyed performing a lot more than teaching it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the struggle, I guess, with a lot of musicians to say, well, if I'm going to play it, can do I have the ability to teach someone else? Right. Like right now, I'm trying to teach guitar to kids. I would say probably 12 to 14, because that's, to me, I think a really good age. Their fingers are starting to develop and they can play a little bit better, and they're starting to pay attention to music a little more. But I've found that I hit my ceiling with the teaching part of it, because they learn so fast. I don't know if I should be doing this or not, And so, for that is a stretch, and for you to be able to play, which we want to get into in a little bit, talk about your bands and stuff that you do there.
Okay.
And then actually perform with the students and then teach them too. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was, you were talking about, playing along with the students. When I was at Moorhead, one of our professors was a guy named Jay Flippin. And people that are in the central Kentucky region during that period of time, it seemed like everybody knew him, especially in music circles. Jay was a piano player, could play classical well, could play jazz well, could play commercial. He actually wrote one of the Kentucky Fried Chicken jingles.
Oh, wow. No.
He won an Emmy for one of the things that he wrote, or was nominated for one of the things he wrote for a soap opera. It was like a little jazz piece that he wrote.
That's awesome.
So, just an incredibly intelligent guy. Also played in church every Sunday morning. So he'd go out and play a gig in the middle, like Sandusky, Ohio, and drive back through the middle of the night and never miss, his church gig in the morning. He was just that kind of guy. But at any rate, what Jay would do is he had this kind of a pop band that he would take out to do proms and wedding receptions and stuff like that. And he had his regular guys, but whenever somebody wasn't available, he would take one of the students if he thought that they were kind of almost ready. And I say almost ready because I'd go and play gigs with them. And it seemed like every time we do a gig, there'd be one thing on the gig that I wasn't quite ready to do. And he'd kind of look over at me with that knowing look. It's like, yeah, you want to go back and practice that. But from that experience, I learned so much, just being on the bandstand and, playing with musicians that were better than I was. Yeah. So I want to share that with my students, and you had I think one of the questions you had mentioned earlier was talking about the band Misdirection. That's actually how that group started. Several semesters back at Cumberland, we had a semester where I had some strong rhythm section players, but I didn't have many really strong horn players in my jazz band. So Steve Sutton, who teaches with me, he says, "Hey, why don't you take your rhythm section and you and I, meaning him, and he played trombone and I played saxophone. Why don't we just do some stuff with them that can challenge them and keep them, satisfied?" And so I started out with trombone and tenor sax, and then piano, bass, guitar, and drums. Eventually, we added a vocalist, and then after those students graduated, we added a trumpet player. And the group still performs from time to time. The vocalist is still the same student. The drummer's still the same student. We've rotated some other people in, but it was fun to give that gigging opportunity to some of the students.
And they need to see that. I mean, that's awesome that they get to.
Well, there's nothing like being on the bandstand. It's like, oh, how do we end this tune?
Listen, I'm going to tell myself. So we this summer, Misdirection came and played downtown. We had a special event, Christmas in July. So we called David and asked if Misdirection could come and play. And the day of, we were getting the sound equipment together, and I get a text from David. He said, "Hey, what are you doing this evening?" Long story short, I ended up sitting in with you guys, and we were sitting there looking over the sheet music, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I had like another 30 minutes to practice. And there was a lot of muting of guitar strings and smiling, but it was a great experience because I've never really sat in with a true, jazz big band sound, band. So that was a stretch. And I loved it, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome! I was so happy that you got to do that.
Yeah, and I think if students have the exposure, they can. Erases a lot of those. Am I good enough?
Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason that Jay did that, and part of the reason I do it too is it's just kind of like, okay, if I believe in you enough to take you out and perform in public in a professional situation, obviously I think you're a pretty good musician.
Yeah. And that's the confidence builder. My own professors asked me, to do this thing. So are you guys getting to play a lot, or what how does that work?
Not a lot these days. After COVID hit, of course, everything shut down, and coming out of it, I haven't pushed the band a lot. When you have small groups, you have to have somebody who's really promoting and making phone calls and talking to clubs and the various festivals and things like that. And in the right about just before COVID hit, I became department chair, down at Cumberlands. So my time to do extra things like that had kind of got absorbed, and so I haven't pushed the band as much. And we have played a little bit. We did that gig, of course, this summer. Yeah. We've done a couple of wedding receptions and things like that. Not playing as regularly as used to. When we first started playing, the Wrigley down in Corbin used to have music on a regular basis. And we'd play there once a month, which was fantastic because,
what a great great exposure,
Yeah.
one, and just,
Yeah, and exactly. And then the other thing is, we'd get together and rehearse at Corbin High School for an hour before the gig, learn whatever new material we wanted to, and then go play it immediately.
Oh, that's
It was fantastic. And they don't do that anymore. And I understand why. I don't, the restaurant scene, their profit margins are thin, and if they're, have people that are coming in to sit and listen to the band play for an hour and they're not buying food or, leaving big tips and that kind of stuff. So, but it was a great time.
It's a great run.
So, yeah, it was a great run. And who knows, it could be that somebody at some point starts doing that again.
Yeah.
And plus, this is, I love Southeast Kentucky, but it's not a place that you really associate with jazz in particular.
Mm-hmm.
You think country music, rock music, things
sure,
like that. That's fine. But there's not a huge calling for it here. It would pretty much, in order to get something on regular, you'd almost have to have a club owner that was something they were really into.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads into another question, because
Sure.
you can go up and there's a university, in Richmond and Lexington area,
Sure.
and they have a lot of recitals. They have a lot of special groups come through. You talked about several jazz artists that come through there often because they're, they've got a lot of students. They've got a lot of kind of built-in audiences already. Now, that's great and wonderful, but how would you suggest? So, I mean, you mentioned maybe a club owner or a location that says, hey, I really like jazz. I don't care. You guys are going to have to just deal with it,
Yeah.
What would be other ways that we could kind of help expose that? Because I generally think, and that's one of the reasons why we asked you to play at the Christmas in July, is that once you kind of listen to some of this stuff, it's good. And when you have musicians that are talented like that can play it, it's intriguing.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's at that gig and then pretty much any gig we ever play, we'll have people come. It's like, wow, I never realized I liked this music before.
Yeah,
that's the highest compliment somebody could pay to.
Exactly.
It's just like, well, good. I'm glad I educated you. And that was the thing that was cool about the Wrigley is, people would come in to get dinner, they would hear the band, and occasionally we'd get gigs out of that. Played somebody's like 40th wedding anniversary, thing after that. They heard us there and became big fans. But yeah, I don't really know the answer to that question. It'd be great if Corbin, London, Somerset had multiple venues that had music regularly.
Yeah.
But once again, if it's a restaurant, that's kind of a tricky thing to do there.
It is.
I did see one thing a couple of years ago, which I thought was kind of cool, and it was just a picture of a receipt that somebody had, and it had, it was from a restaurant, and it had their food charge, and then it had the tip, and then it had band tip. So if somebody wanted to go and they paying for the food and they wanted to just leave a $5 tip for the band, it's like a tip jar.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you don't have to do a cover charge in that case. If somebody wants to pay that they can. I mean, that's one way. Yeah, I don't really know. Unless there's somebody that wants to start a local artist series or something like that. There we go. Let's do that. Let's do it.
Well, I always thought we recently in London, and we're talking about London, Kentucky. They just recently built in their city park a stage area, which great for venues. The last 2 summers they've had big names come through there, and very well attended. I've went through quite a few. I don't know if you got to make it to any of the town center series, but absolutely enjoyable to sit out on the lawn, a very safe area. You can bring your kids and let them play, and the music's great and the venue's great. I don't know, jazz, Sunday jazz or something.
Haven't they had some of the local bands open for some of these bigger acts? Am I correct about that? Because I know they had the Little River band coming in. It seemed to me like some...
Yeah, they did. They had Starship come in last year. Little River Band this year was kind of the big one. Yeah. And they had local artists. And it's really cool. Good exposure.
Which I think is great.
And that's what they need. Everyone needs to hear a healthy dose of, what's going on, around here as far as musically goes, because they're just not going to go in the bars with their kids.
Yeah.
Let's just make it, call it that. And I feel like sometimes we take it for granted that, there's talent here until it makes it to Chris Stapleton as an example. We were talking to Jessica Blankenship in the last session, and she's talking about a lot of these folks, they're here. Tyler Childers and some of the bigger names in country, they were here, and they played the courthouse in London to 30 people.
Yeah.
But until he actually got his Grammy and the big album and recognition, oh, wait a minute, this guy must be something, and they sell out Rep Arena.
Yeah.
So There has to
And
be
good for them.
Yeah, no, and that's great, and that's what you want.
Yeah,
you want
absolutely.
the outside recognition for Kentucky and for the. But there's a sense sometimes we just take for granted the old town here.
I think part of it too has to do with the fact that in this day and age we all got our cell phones, we got our computers, and you've got Netflix and YouTube and everything else. Entertainment is just so easy to come by.
It is.
And I tell my students in these music classes, like the music appreciation classes, and those are classes for students that aren't music students. They're taking that class because they have to, and I recognize that. And I tell them, I say, listen, I come in here and I'll play a piece of music. It might be an orchestral piece or something like that, and I'll say, I'm playing this through YouTube, and it's coming through speakers, and it's like to hear this through that little system compared to hearing it live. There's nothing that compares. It's not even close to the same. And I say, if you have the opportunity to go hear live music, whatever happens to be orchestral or jazz or whatever, go hear it live. Because there's just a different feel. It's like you don't just hear the music; you feel the music. It's
exactly.
And it's the shared communal experience of being in an audience for something that's just really being performed well is magical. And I think a lot of times it's real easy for these students to either not get exposed to that or to forget about it, or just to become numb because it's like, it's like TikTok, 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 YouTube, it's like, and like I said, I don't know how many times I've had somebody come to me after a live performance they weren't expecting to attend, but somebody drove them to or just happened to be going on someplace where they were out in public, and they just go, man, that was great. I was like, good.
Perfect example. I'm not a big symphony guy, but a friend of mine from college, we every now and then we'll get together, we'll go to pick a destination and go travel there. We actually ended up picking Chicago. This is pre-COVID. Went to Chicago, went right down by the Bean, right down to where the big, I forget what the green area is there, where they actually have an outdoor auditorium. And the Chicago Symphony was playing. And I can't remember the piece, but I know at the end of it, I wept. I mean, I could not hold back the emotion. It was so amazing. I'm like, man, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on here right now. But it just struck me because it was just so moving and all these parts and all these things. And how do people put, 130 piece, group of musicians together to do this one big sound? And I think we take that for granted because some guy sits behind a little desk with a computer and he takes one recording at a time and smashes them together. Then iTunes and Apple Music or whoever's, Spotify crushes the fire out of it. And then when you put your headphones on, you're blasted in one big file.
And I think all that, what all that comes back to is, and this is another thing I tell my students is, music is one of many art forms that we have. You've got theater, you got dance, you got visual art, sculpture, painting, whatever it happens to be. But all those are forms of human expression. Somebody is trying to communicate something about their life experience to somebody else, and, you think about, talk about the blues, that's a really very, it's a direct type of music, it's like, I think almost everybody can hear that and just immediately be drawn into, what I used to play in a blues band. I don't know if you knew that. I did not know that. No, I did not know. Which one? Robert Hancock used to teach.
Job. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I worked on I did his first album cover.
Oh, you did?
And I forgot that because you guys recorded that album in Knoxville. And I went down there the day that, I'm not sure if the horn section was there that day or not. I was there with the day the guitar player was. I don't know. Okay. Yeah. I've forgotten that.
So, but that's one of the things about that group is I remember, it's like, and it's funny because me, the cerebral classical / jazz musician coming in, playing in that setting, if you play that type of those musical ideas, it doesn't work with the blues, because it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's almost, it's not the right style. It's, Bob would stand up and he'd just play these big blasting solos. And sometimes he wouldn't even play the changes right, but the audience would react. And I'm like, okay, there's something here.
He could sell coats to Eskimos. That guy, he was just
But that was but that taught me a very valuable lesson. Here I am, thinking, it's like I'm going to play all these really interesting ideas, and I get kind of a moderate response, and then he'd play, the simplest, very basic but very sincere, and very passionate, idea, and I was like, okay, I get it now. But what I was going to say is, these different styles of music, or whatever they happen to be, they're all trying to communicate something, and. when I teach my world music class, which is a different class altogether, I tell my students, I say, some of this stuff's going to sound weird to you, but understand it was created by a culture, and they had something to say. And even if you don't like it or you don't really, think it's something you want to listen to, at least try to see if you can understand where they're coming from and what was they were trying to communicate.
Oh, yeah.
Because all art forms are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, the essence of music is that we're trying to connect, with somebody else, but, joy or sadness or, angst or anger or, celebration, whatever it is we're trying to communicate. That's the cool thing about music.
Yeah, or even a break from reality. A lot of movie folks talk about that. So I create movies to distract you from the real.
Yeah.
Take a break a minute.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, so what do you listen to? So if you said, hey, I'm not saying there's these little polls that go around.
Yeah.
If you're on the island, stuck on an island, what would you take with you? But what's your choice? Like if you're riding down the road and you're going to take a road trip.
It's funny. My daughter's always asking me, "Hey, Dad, what's your favorite this? What's your favorite that?" I'm like, I don't know what my favorite is. It's like I like a lot of colors. I like a lot of favorites. But I will try to answer that question. If you look at the CDs or the things that are in my car, there are a lot of jazz recordings and things like that. But this is kind of funny, and I wouldn't have thought I would have said this 10 years ago.
Okay.
But I mentioned my daughter's really enjoys performing. She and my wife are hugely into musical theater. And, I always thought music theater, My Fair Lady, that kind of stuff's like, it's not something I was really excited about. But they have and when they drive around, they have the XM station. It's the Broadway station. It has all the contemporary stuff. Yeah. And some of it's really cool. And we've been through a strange set of circumstances. We've been to New York several times in the last couple of years. Most of it had to do with COVID reservations that couldn't be canceled but could be rescheduled. So we're like, well, we've already got the room. Might as well go again. Yeah. So we've actually seen a few Broadway shows in the last several years, and some of them are an awful lot of fun. Some really great music, though. But probably my favorite one that we saw this last trip was Beetlejuice, based on the movie Beetlejuice. The music's really well done, and it's funny, and it's creative, and it's quirky, and and I actually used that. Keep going back to my music appreciation class. In my music appreciation class, I talked about very early Western classical music and Gregorian chant and that kind of stuff. And one of the things that they use in the Mass for the Dead is this melody called the Dies Irae. Well, that Dies Irae has shown up in a bunch of different movie scores. I mean, things like Frozen 2 and Star Wars and It's a Wonderful Life and things like that. Well, it was actually in Beetlejuice as well. There's just one little snippet of it at the end of one of the songs. It was like, Dies Irae.
Did you stop? Did you stop and go, like, that's it?
So I mean, these guys are, they're educated and they know what's going on. So, but yeah, I've been listening to a fair amount of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not some place I thought I would go.
Yeah.
I like to listen to some like funk bands and stuff like that. I've got tickets to see Tower of Power up in in Lexington coming up here in a month or so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah. And those things that sometimes, like I work on a computer all day. Sometimes I just like not to even touch it. So I can imagine sometimes it's just freeing just to not have anything and just.
Well, if you're like me, if the music's something that really gets your attention, you can't concentrate on your work because you're wanting to listen to what the guys are doing. It's like, oh, it's kind of cool. What is that? It's like, I got to turn it off.
I
got to get productive.
We'll get it done. Yeah. Before we started the show, we were talking about, what does it look like from here? Is it one of those things where, you're talking about 33 years, and is this what I want to do? There's a part where, you can say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I want to do something else.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question because, as I mentioned earlier, I've enjoyed teaching. It's been great. I've met a lot of great students, a lot of great colleagues, both at Cumberland and then around the state. I've gotten a chance to perform with some, great musicians and become good friends and that kind of thing. But I have been finding myself lately, I'm getting closer to the age where I could retire. If the stock market ever cooperates. And my daughter, she's currently a sophomore at Cumberland, so I'm going to get her through school. But after that, I don't know, however many years down the road, I've been thinking about, well, what is next? What do I want to do after that? And I'll tell you, one of the things before I retire that actually has me excited, and I don't know if you know about this or not, But Cumberland has recently really started pushing a study abroad program. So I'm in the approval phase right now for doing a study abroad trip, not this coming summer, but the summer after. And the way that would work is a year from right now, in the spring, I'd be teaching a world music class that's specifically set up for a study abroad component.
Oh, wow.
And then, so we do that in the spring semester. And as soon as the graduation happens, we get on a plane, we fly over to London, spend 3 days there, and then go through the channel and spend 3 days in Paris, and then come back. And there's a lot of touristy kind of stuff, but then there's a music component as well, because it's education, music, world music, education thing. So I'm actually very excited about that. I've only been to Europe the one time. It was that chamber choir trip from Cumberland years ago.
Oh yeah. The what was it? It was wasn't it Sound of Music?
Yeah, it was went to Munich and Salzburg. Yeah, so Salzburg was Sound of Music. So I got to take part in that trip, and I loved it. I've always wanted to go back, but just getting married and having children and that kind of stuff. So
life.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm very much looking forward to that trip. And I don't know if it'd be possible post teaching to hook up with a company that does that kind of thing, but I could see myself really enjoying it.
That would be fun.
I'll be your tour guide.
Yeah.
I'll take you to London and I'll show you all the music sites.
That would be awesome. Well, the other day we were listening to a podcast called Smartless, and it's got Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes from Will and Grace, and Will Arnett.
Okay.
And there's the three of them, and they just talk to people. They had not Tom Cruise. It was Tom Hanks.
Okay.
Which we love Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks could just talk about anything and not be boring.
Yeah.
And they asked him, they said, do you ever just get tired? Because, every movie he does is just huge, and he immerses himself in it, and he's everything, he puts all in on it. And they said, do you ever just at the end of the day go, I wish I wasn't doing this every day. I wish I hadn't put that much time in. He goes, no. As a matter of fact, I put that much time into it because I want to. And then at the end of the day, if I said I was tired of it, I know the next day I'm going to want to do it again. So I wonder sometimes, it sounds great to maybe not teach anymore, but, at some point along the way you go, this is really who I am,
Yeah. Well, and, I can see myself, post, teaching, university full time. Yeah. Like you mentioned, it's part of kind of your DNA of who you are.
Yeah.
My wife actually, when she retired from teaching public schools, she took a year off and kind of was looking for something else to do. And for a while that was okay, but after a while it kind of drove her nuts. And then when this thing opened up at Cornerstone where she was working, teaching little kids a couple of days a week, she just loved it.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing that she told me about this, and I've heard this from other people that are retired, she says the cool thing about it is I could walk away at any point because I don't have to do it.
Well, that is freeing to say if
primary source of
income.
Yeah. I could see myself going out into some public schools and maybe doing some teaching and that kind of thing. But,
you think you'll still gig?
I don't know. It's like, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I'd say, oh, absolutely. I could see it going either one of two ways. Either I could just say, I'm going to really try to start pushing it more. I kind of think that's probably what would happen. But then there's part of me that thinks, I wonder if I could just put it down and walk away. I don't think so.
Yeah, I can't imagine that being the thing.
And here's another thing too. I mentioned, once again, my daughter's, really into the theater thing. She's talked about one of her dreams is to do the Disney summer program.
Yes.
And she'd love to be a Disney princess, down there.
Oh yeah.
At Disney World,
Orlando.
Be one of those, people. If she ever got a gig someplace like that, I could see mom and dad pulling up and moving there. I think it'd be fun just to kind of follow her around. It's like. If she was ever doing a production like a community theater and they needed somebody to direct the orchestra, maybe I could do that, or maybe Dad could just play in the pit. Her shows,
built-in musicians will travel with the star.
Yeah. So it's like right now, honestly, I and I know you can relate to this. I've taken joy in just watching her do her thing and find her path. I don't know where she's going to go with it. She loves teaching. Like I said, this community theater she's doing, she's directing and working with some kids.
That's great.
So it's just kind of fun to watch hers. I'm sure it is with Maggie and her art, to see.
It is, and she's actually at Cumberland using her art, working for a marketing department. So she's that's her work study, and I did nothing to, they just kind of saw her and recognized the talent. And I was like, okay, just kind of watching from afar, making sure it works, and they absolutely love her. So, so you were talking about, maybe traveling and doing those kind of things, but still staying in music, and that's one of the things that I want to encourage, because I'm kind of like this too, is that as their kids are growing up, you want to just make sure they get the top of the list when it comes to delving out your time. But you miss playing music. I took off for sports for about 4 years of playing, and then, this past summer, like, okay, I'll play. And I want to encourage a lot of the guys, because I know there's several guys out that have done this, where they just kind of say, well, maybe it's not for me anymore. I still feel like we should keep it there, still leave yourself open for opportunities to play.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because everybody, you've got a voice, that needs to be heard. And I think part of the reason I haven't pushed the gig in so much, since I became department chair, is because I want to make sure that it's a product I feel good about, and rather than just kind of go through the motions, And I think at some point, post-retirement, you get a lot more time. It's like, okay, I can practice, I can prepare the material, and put together the band that I feel good about.
Yeah.
Then it's easier to get on the phone or start sending emails and say, hey, you should check us out. Let us come play for you.
Yeah.
Do that kind of thing. So I could see it going that way too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you want to do it, but you want to do it, something that you feel like is a good product, and that kind of thing. So, you mentioned taking some time off because of sports and that kind of thing. It's like when you have kids, they're only young once.
Mm-hmm.
You only get one chance to do that. So that's where you and I both kind of are right now, is making sure that we give the added attention while that time is there, and then once they go off and do their own thing, then perhaps
it's
start to focus back on you.
And they actually want you to leave them alone at a certain point. They're like, you really don't have to go to everything I do. We've not got that there with Miles, but with Maggie, she's like, you don't really have to come to that flute recital. It's okay. Well, we will be there. Well, good. Well, I appreciate you being on today, David.
Sure.
I will say that whenever I was making a list, you were actually the third one on there. Because education is so important.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes teachers really don't get enough time with the student. They want to teach them everything before they leave. It's 4 years enough. You know, and well, good luck. And if you need something, call me. But then you have the next group of students coming through, and so they kind of push them through quickly. But sometimes I wonder if teachers just worry about that just a little bit.
A little bit. It depends on who the student is. Some students, they'll come through, and after 3 years, it's just like, okay, they're ready.
Mm-hmm.
They were almost ready when they got here. Then some of us, just like 12 years later, it's just like, I'm not sure this is ever going to happen. But I mean, it's like, it's a joy for me to watch students come in as 18-year-old kids still, because they're just fresh out of high school, and leave as 22 and 23-year-old young adults. It's a fun transition to watch, because there's still that kind of like, oh, I know everything, to it's like, okay, maybe I don't know everything. It's like, okay, I'm going out into the world now. But to see that maturity process is a lot of fun. It's great to be a part of that.
Well, I was going to say, because for as long as you've done it, you're starting to see like kids of students that you had. So you're seeing the second generation of some of your students. You're going, they trusted, their parents trusted me, and now they're trusting me.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, it is. It's like, makes you feel old, but it's like, I've had a couple of second generation students come through my jazz band. So got one awesome. There now, as a matter of fact.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad. Well, David, I appreciate it very much for having you on the show, and I hope later on down the road we can talk more jazz and that kind of thing. I really feel like that is one thing I would like to see more of around here.
Me too.
I'm sure of it. So, well, thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks.